Landed on the bank. Like he's sitting there. Just like that, the bank's here, he's nose up to the bank. Because when it landed, he got it. So I get asked a lot, when a swim jig? Like, when do I throw a swim jig? Well, the obvious answer is, you know, you get grass and lily pads and things like that, shallow water. You know, a lot of people think bushes, and yeah, it works great. But I don't think a lot of people think a lot just about open water. What's going on right now is the water's, you know, around that 60, 62. Fish are starting to spawn. And it's just, the conditions aren't right for a spinnerbait. Like, the water's a little bit clear. There's no wind. So you want that bait to look as realistic as you can. Make it look, and that's where the swim jig comes into play. I mean, and there's so many things I can do with it. You know, I can swim it up high, I can swim it down low, but the cool thing is I come to a laydown or something, I ain't got to reach down and pick up a flipping stick. You know, I can literally fish this just like a normal jig. So it lets me cover a lot of water, but it's just something that they don't see a lot. You know, and every day I get more and more confident using this, just because a lot of people now are throwing spinner baits and chatter baits and things like that. But I mean, you'll know when it's right, when the perfect time. I mean, you'll see the #1 enemy of a bass on bed is a perch. And this thing looks just like perch, but when you start seeing them, you know, push perch up there away from the bed, or you got brim spawning or anything like that, that's when the swim jig shines. Smoked it. A lot of times whenever this time of year, 62 degrees, you want to go right back in the same spot, just in case an old female's laying there. Using the smaller one today, the 2.75, because the water is pretty clear, not a lot of wind through here, so I want that bait to get down there a little deeper. If you know, if it was dirtier, you know, and they were up there like a foot, I'd use that 3.25. You can see on that bank up there, see where that water's washed out. Like, I've seen a lot of fish over the years spawn on stuff like that. It's just like clean gravel, even though there's a lot of gravel through here. But a lot of these washouts, you may have, you know, a dirt bank or a rock bank, and you have that little washout. Well, it's going to push some gravel there, and those fish like to spawn. Another male. They're eating it good though. I mean, like throwing slack in the bait, and that's what you want. One of the things that's going on right now, I mean, you know, 3 or 4 bites just in no time, is they're not wanting to trap it against the bank. And you know, the water's 61, 62, and it was cold last night, so I'm thinking that's been up, you know, a little higher than that. But my guess is that jig's coming across the bed, you know, and they're just tracking it out until they can't handle it anymore. But you know, it's hard to lock in on one thing whenever you've had 3 or 4 bites. But I think I do need to fish it out a little bit further. I mean, some of those fish are coming in 3 or 4 foot of water, which surprises me, honestly. It's almost like spook fishing. I'm just hitting the line, popping the line. You know, when I'm watching my bait, my line's just going up and down. And every little hop you know, you feel resistance whenever you're popping it, because you're a jig. You know, and when you get a bite, it just goes, it's just like, most times just like something cut your line, like there's no longer anything there, and either you'll feel it or you'll just go slack and you'll see your line just start moving off. A few times I'll just throw it out and reel it in. You know, that's when I want to keep it up, you know, really high on the water column. It's just kind of like anything else, you know, you'll experiment with a couple different things, and it may be based on the cover. You know, I may be coming down a shallow log and keep that bait high and pop it, and there may be another time where, you know, I'm coming through pads and I just want to reel it. Just from the bites we've had so far, like they've come on that little bit steeper stuff, a little steeper grade than this real flat stuff. And the reason being is, I think, is because this lake fluctuates. They get up there and build a bed on this flat stuff, and tomorrow they'll be dry. So they want to get on that steeper stuff, so when that water comes up and down a foot, they're still in the water, not dry. They're not to that stage, if they are spawning. Of course, I can't see, I haven't seen any, but they're not to that stage yet when they just chase a bunch of stuff, where you could take that jig like that right there and just reel it down, you know, where they just are defending the bed a bunch. It's just, oh dang it, just now starting. How I missed him. He just like threw slack in it. Yeah, I'm still a little confused on how, you know, what's going on, what stage the fish are in. Water temperature says it should be, all the fish should be on the bank, but I just don't think it's the case. You know, there's so many variables for those fish to move shallow. One, and just one, is water temperature. But this lake fluctuates up and down a bunch. And I'm thinking, since, you know, that it's been low and these fish just ain't felt like it's time yet. Just not seeing any action on the bank. You know, this morning when we started, I really expected it to be later on in the spawn where they were really be guarding. And that's why it makes this swim jig good. You can do so many things. I mean, you can bring it by the bed, you know, when they're actually spawning. And then also, you know, when they start guarding fry, that's whenever it gets really good, because, you know, you'll start seeing, when your jig comes through the water, you'll start seeing that fry scattering, and they don't like that, because it, you know, it looks like a perch coming through there trying to eat their babies. But, you know, it's just not the conditions for a spinnerbait or something like that. It's, you know, this just looks real. And I can kill it, you know, by some of these deeper trees, and I actually just fish it like a jig. That's just the deal. I mean, if I want to get bites, it's going to have to be on something steep. I think it has just all about that waterfall, and they just ain't up there where. And the last two bites has been like land and get it. And we had a cold night last night. It's maybe one of them that just picks up later in the day. Well, we got the male pattern going. Babies Like when it lands, and maybe I'm just landing on the beds and they don't want to chase it coming across. I don't know. Maybe there is no beds. I don't know. Just don't believe it with it being 65 degrees. I need a new cricket on the back. So one thing about the, swimming a jig, I've fallen in love with the braided line. And typically, grass, lily pads, things like that, I'm all braided. Like I tie directly to my bait, and I use 50-pound Sunline FX2. But you'll see here, since we're on this clear water, not a lot of stuff, I got like a 2-foot, 25-pound leader. And all that does is a couple things. One is, if they can't see the braid, but two, if I come over a stick or if I actually flip it up there, then that braid's not going to catch. This line's not going to catch in the rocks or the wood or something like that. But what the braid does is just let me, I literally have 2 swim jig rods. They're both exactly the same, one for a white jig and one for a green one. But you'll notice it has a real soft tip. This is a 7.4, and it's labeled as a heavy, but it's kind of on the light side. And what that tip does is when I'm swimming it, you get it, it just loads it up. And really, this is a Booyah Mobster. It has a really light weed guard, so it's almost like open hook fishing. You don't need a lot to break that weed guard. So I like that one, and it just feels good when I set the hook and it loads into them. The rod takes the bulk of the tension, because the braid doesn't stretch at all. And then I like a fast reel, just for a lot of it's, when they come off of the bank or they come in the pads, they'll get it and come towards you. It lets me catch up with it. But the biggest thing is just at the end of your productive water, I can get the bait in real fast and then make another cast. That's a Lew's 8.3. This is actually a 7.5. I forgot. This is a Lew's 7.5 Hyper Mag. Early this spring I switched to a little bit slower because I was trying to get the bait down there a little bit deeper. With the water temperature being low 60s, it's actually climbed 4 or 5 degrees just in a couple hours. I'm looking for stuff that they're going to spawn. Shallow pockets, creeks. What typically happens is the first wave of spawners, they'll kind of take the best spawning grounds, which is, like I said, the pockets, the backs of creeks. And then the second wave of spawners, there's a lot of fish that'll spawn on the main lake, kind of the main chute of the creeks. Like I said, even on the main lake. So, today with the water temperature being that and knowing that it's just now getting here, it's not like it's been warm and then dropped back. We're kind of looking at those places where they first pull up. So, and like I said, there's a lot of swim jig. It's very, very versatile. And typically, it's weeds, it's bushes, it's shad spawn on dock kind of deal. But whenever that spinnerbait and that those conditions get tough, it's actually just a good kind of finesse spinnerbait. And that water gets clear, or like I said, it gets flat calm. You can swim that thing around and get some bites. Just not a lot of people do it. And a lake like this where there's not a lot of cover in the water, these fish are still going to spawn, and typically they're going to be on that, like right here, it's just a little bit steeper, where if that water does move a little bit, then they still have water on their back. But you just got to cover some water, and as the spawning process goes, you know, as that moves into, like I said, like the fry and later in the spawn, they get really aggressive. You know, they really want to guard it. And that's whenever it can be really, really good. Like I say, my favorite thing is just being able to throw it somewhere and not have to pick up a flipping stick like the edge of that rock right there, and just being able to fish it like a jig and then just move on down the bank. Well, that's kind of how the day's been so far. Just hard to get a bite. Whenever we do get a bite, I lose it. So hopefully you learned something, you know. Don't take this experience as the bait. I mean, Swim Jig has become top 5 lures that I have confidence in. And not just in the spring, year round. So hopefully you learned something, and thanks for riding along. Dang it.